What's going on, everybody? Welcome to our podcast, Mass Media Hysteria. My name is Court. I will be the host for the duration. With me, as always, is Chris.
How's it going, everyone?
And today is Sunday, July 11th. Of course, this will be going up on the channel on Monday, but here we are. Hopefully, you guys are watching the Euro finals, having a good time with that. Apparently, it's in penalty kicks right now. So here's what's going to be on the show today. We are going to do a full spoilers review of Loki episode 5, Journey into Mystery. We're going to talk a little bit about, Marvel's new movie Black Widow just came out on Friday in theaters and on Disney Plus with Premiere Access, and it did some crazy stuff at the box office, or the Disney Plus office.
Both of them. It crushed both of them apparently. So interesting news there.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a bit about that, and then of course, obviously, we're going to go into a full spoilers review of Black Widow. Now, if you want to see non-spoiler reviews of Loki or Black Widow, those are both up on my channel now, so you can check those out. As always, we want to thank you guys for watching. We want to encourage you to, if you like the video, drop a like on it, maybe share it around. It helps the video get out to more people. It helps the channel grow. We appreciate that very much. And of course, we want to remind you that if you're not always in the mood to watch a 90-minute YouTube video, you can always get audio versions of this podcast on various podcasting services. Right now, the big ones for us are Google Podcasts and Spotify. Still waiting on Apple and Stitcher. We'll see what happens there. But that said, we are going to launch into our spoilers review of Loki episode 5, the penultimate episode, which came out back on Wednesday on Disney Plus. This episode is called Journey into Mystery. Now, Chris, you and I have both been quite enjoying the Loki series, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
And for me, and I think you were with me on this, I think we both felt that prior to talking about this one, because we haven't talked about this one yet, prior to this episode, I think we both felt that episode 4 was the best one of the series.
Yeah, it kept improving for me. Each episode I felt kind of topped the previous one. Okay.
And would you say you feel that way about this one or no?
Yes and no. There are things about this that I quite loved. But it did feel a bit like a penultimate episode. Like it did feel like it was just kind of setting the stage for something bigger and better to come, hopefully with the finale. So it was kind of mixed. I mean, I actually really enjoyed the episode, but I don't know if it had the same kind of like incremental step up from episode to episode compared to last week.
I'm kind of with you there. I really liked this episode. I'm still standing by the fact that I thought that episode 4 was the best so far. I'm really hoping they nail the landing next week, but we'll have to wait and see for that.
Yes.
So I did want to mention off the top, the episode's title is Journey into Mystery, and I'm going to say this straight up. It's a TV episode title. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't impact the episode in any way. I think that title is absolutely fucking stupid, and I hate it. How do you feel about it?
It sounds like a Doctor Who episode title, which is corny and fun, so I like it.
Okay. So I'm trying to, again, we're not gonna go through every single beat of the episode, but we're gonna touch on a bunch of things. And so the first thing, at the end in the post-credit scene of last week's episode, after Loki gets pruned, he wakes up in this sort of wasteland, and we see 4 Loki variants who now we know are classic Loki, boastful Loki. We didn't know last week why he was called boastful Loki. Now we kind of do. We have Kid Loki, and of course we have Alligator Loki, who I'm calling Alligator because I'm a fucking idiot. What did you think of the sort of reveal of these Lokis?
Yeah, I mean, we got a teased last week, so but it was more just kind of like a visual tease. Seeing their personalities was really interesting. I still love Alligator Loki. I think he's adorable. I love him. Everything he did, just little things, just little sight gags. Wherever they walked, there's just a little CGI alligator just in the background, just kind of stalking him. No, it was fun. There were interesting characters. Richard E. Grant felt very similar to kind of Tom Hiddleston's portrayal. Like, it didn't seem like an impersonation, but you could kind of feel like they were maybe the closest out of everyone.
Yeah, certainly I got that too.
Certainly more than the alligator. And yeah, it was interesting hearing kind of his backstory of when he came to the crossroads that was Thanos on the ship escaping Asgard. He kind of hid and he, you know, made a projection. He talked about being like incredible at producing these very realistic projections, and he just fucking hid, and he went to another planet for who knows how long, just hiding out. And he eventually got lonely, and he said that he missed his brother, and that's when the TVA got him. And so I found everything with Richard E. Grant to be the most interesting out of the other characters. He didn't have that much to do, but he still had the most out of the other three, I suppose. Alligator Loki was cute. Kid Loki was interesting. They just said that he killed Thor when he was young. That's why he was, you know, vaporized by the TVA, pruned, which is interesting. But again, like, he didn't really have that much to do. In Boastful Loki, I didn't even find him that boastful, especially not compared to like the kid, and he didn't have that much to do. So it was fun. It felt like it was just kind of like these interesting characters that the story just kind of walks through, as opposed to new supporting characters that are really elevating the show or anything. So what did you think of them?
Well, like you, I was most into classic Loki, and a big part of that is I love Richard E. Grant. Going back a long way. Have you ever seen With Nail and I?
No, I was planning on watching it very soon because I think last week you mentioned it. And
did I? Okay.
Yeah, it's been on my watch list for a while, and I do need to check it out.
That was my introduction to Richard E. Grant, and he's hilarious in it. But of course, he's also in, like, he was great in Bram Stoker's Dracula. And, he was recently in The Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, I loved him. I loved his like ridiculous costume that he looks like he bought at, like, you know, Value Village or Goodwill or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have those in the States, but
no, but that, I feel like that reference makes sense. It's like a dollar store or something, some cheap little knockoff store where you get just the worst kind of materials and the worst kind of Halloween costumes.
Exactly. I will say this about Alligator Loki, and I mentioned this in the spoiler-free review, but when he's like, excuse me, when he's like chilling in his pool or when he's walking along, I thought the CGI looked really, really good. When he's like moving quickly and attacking people, like when they get attacked by, like, what was it, like President Loki and like his whole crew?
Yeah.
I thought the CGI there on Alligator Loki did not look so good.
Yeah, it's one of those things with the show where oftentimes a lot of times the CGI looks quite good, but then there's always moments where it looks kind of cheap. I felt that in a few of the episodes, like episode 3 when they were on Lamentis, there's a lot of shots that look great, and then there was a couple times where I was like, oh, that's really bad green screen. And yeah, I agree here, where there were times when they just had a close-up of Alligator Loki, and I'm like, oh, that looks good. But when he's like meant to be attacking people, I don't know if I would say it's bad. It's just very noticeably CGI.
Right.
You could
that's a better way to put it. Yeah.
You could just tell like there's nothing there, and someone's just like pretending to be attacked by a tiny alligator.
So then we cut back to the TVA, and of course, you know, at the end of last episode, Sylvie got the better of Ravonna Renslayer, and now they're going to work together, and Ravonna's going to get Miss Minutes to bring up all the information on, like, the beginning of the TVA from the beginning of time. But then, of course, a bunch of hunters break in, and basically at the end of the scene, Sylvie sort of sacrifices herself, prunes herself, because that's the only way she can get back to the Loki that we all know, presumably anyway. So that happens. We catch up with Loki and the other Lokis, and they introduce this character who, of course, now I'm blanking on it. Apparently it's from the comics, the big sort of cloud monster thing.
Oh yeah, I can't think of what his name is.
Alfio or something like that.
Yeah, I forget what it's called.
I thought that looked kind of cool. A little abstract, but whatever.
Yeah.
And they go to their little Loki lair. I appreciated that they were drinking box wine. I thought that was funny. And this is something that I don't know that a lot of people would catch, but there's a needle drop right when we enter the lair, when they're all hanging out and drinking box wine. And the song that they're listening to is Wonderwall, but not the Oasis version. You may be too young to remember this, but there was a band that had like brief popularity in like the mid 90s called the Mike Flowers Pops. And it was like this sort of kind of gimmicky, like easy listening lounge act, and they did like covers. So they did a cover of Wonderwall, which is hilarious. They also did, I think, Light My Fire by the Doors. But so they're listening to that version of Oasis, which I thought was funny because it's a variant of Wonderwall.
Yeah, for sure. It's a variation of that. I like that. I didn't notice it. I didn't even pick up on that it was Wonderwall.
Yeah, well, we don't get as far as the lyrics. We only hear like the opening music part, but like my ears caught it immediately because I remember like downloading the MP3, in the 90s and listening to it all the time because it's just so funny.
No, it's fun. I mean, it makes sense because this episode, more so than any of the episodes prior, and probably even more than any of the two previous Marvel shows, had so many Easter eggs, and I thought that was really fun. Like this episode did move the story forward, but it just seemed like, you know what, since we are going to the wasteland of the variants, the creators just said, like, let's just throw as many Easter eggs in there as possible. Like when they're walking around, you see, I know just some things I noticed was like a giant Yellow Jacket head from Ant-Man, which played by, what's his name, Corey Stoll.
Sounds right.
Yeah, we don't know what happened to him at the end of that. It seemed like he got vaporized or sent to another dimension, whatever. So we saw one of those. We saw a helicarrier from the Avengers. We saw one of Ronan the Accuser's ships from Guardians of the Galaxy was in the wasteland. There was a spaceship that looked like it was from John Carpenter's 1982 film The Thing. Of course, when we did a pan down into the lair of the Lokis, we saw Mjolnir, just regular Mjolnir, but then also in a jar, this was like half a second, but it was in a jar, there was a frog dressed as Thor, and that's an actual character from the comics named, get ready, Throg. It's very creative. And so that was actually, in a world full of Loki variants, that was actually the first Thor variant that we saw. So I thought that was kind of cute. And there's a lot. I mean, I don't have the entire list in front of me, but I was going through it, and there's just like a lot of little fun Easter eggs that they put in, which I think is cool. I think that if they tried to shoehorn this in throughout the rest of the show, I think it might have been a little bit too much. But I think, again, because of the setting, they had like the perfect excuse of like, why the hell not? This is the dumping ground, so let's just dump everything. So I thought it was fun.
Yeah, I agree. So then, of course, Sylvie wakes up in this wasteland. She meets up with Owen Wilson's character, Mobius, who, of course, at the end of last episode, we didn't know, at least until the post-credit scene, we didn't know if he was dead. Once we got the post-credit, it was kind of a reasonable assumption to assume that he would be in this wasteland as well, but he shows up, and I did think that this was one of the funnier episodes they've done. I had a good few laughs in this, but the fact that he drives up in this like pizza delivery car with this giant like slice of pizza on a spring on the top. I don't know why that made me laugh, but it did.
It reminded me a lot of Planet Pizza from like the Pixar movies.
Oh, totally.
You know how like they have that Easter egg of that truck in every one of their movies. I don't know if it was intentionally a nod, but I mean, everything's Disney, so
it's true.
It comes back.
Yeah. So then I guess essentially they end up meeting up with Loki and the other Lokis, and or excuse me, in the meantime, Tom Hiddleston Loki has made the decision to try and kill this giant being that basically eats matter. And he has a plan on how to do it, and the other Lokis are telling him it's.
Yeah, the conceit of this episode, I mean, what the goal of everyone is really, and they kind of converge by the end of it, is essentially this is when you get pruned, you don't die, you get dropped into this wasteland that's at the edge of time, according to Ravonna. And you see that like throughout when they're walking around, just shit just starts falling from the sky because these are where the variants go to be dumped. But it's meant to be like you're stuck here. You can't get out of here. Even all the other Loki variants like Richard E. Grant are like, this is just our home now. It's a wasteland. We can't get out of here. Tom Hiddleston's Loki is like, no, I don't believe that. And so he sets off, like you said, to kill the giant smoke monster in the sky.
Which is called, I just looked it up, Eliath.
Eliath, that sounds accurate. And then Owen Wilson and Sylvie, or Mobius and Sylvie, I should say, have similar goals. Like she's not trying necessarily to kill Eliath, but she is also like, that's the key, and we need to get out of here. So everyone's essentially just trying to work to get out of this wasteland. And it proves easier for some than others. So like eventually they do kind of meet up. There's a fun kind of sequence when they're in the bunker, and even more Loki show up. Another version of Tom Hiddleston's Loki shows up as President Loki with a cool like tattered suit and a vote for Loki kind of button. I thought that was kind of cute. They have a big old, felt like a Western brawl, kind of like a in a bar punch up,
Right.
where it's not really even an action scene. It's just like everyone's just throwing right hooks and people are flying around. So it was a good time. And then a pretty sweet reunion between Sylvie and Loki as they kind of team up towards the climax of the episode. So let me ask you. Okay.
Well, I was gonna say I really, like I like this show for its bombast and its craziness, but I also like I do really appreciate the sort of quiet moments, and that moment where Sylvie and Loki are just sitting together and he sort of conjures the blanket around them and they're just talking about life. And I thought it was a very sweet little moment. I liked the way they let that scene kind of breathe. Like it wasn't rushed. We've talked about before, like if this was a 2-hour Loki movie, that scene probably would have been really rushed if it was even there at all. But because they had 6 episodes, they drew it out a little bit. I quite like that. You were going to ask me a question.
I was pretty much just about that, how that scene worked for you, especially because it wasn't just them seemingly just kind of connecting. It was also, furthering this sort of relationship that they have, this kind of romantic relationship that at the very least Loki seems interested in. Sylvie, I'm not sure she's quite on the same page. I think that she's more just kind of stoked to have a friend, to have someone else to connect to. Well, Tom Hiddleston is just like, I'm gonna fuck her brains out.
Right.
That's an actual line from the show.
Yes.
Yeah, so I liked it. I don't know if you thought it was weird or if you also liked that scene.
No, I was totally into it. And I also liked, there's a at least this is what I took from it. There was an air of almost what's the word I'm looking for? Like almost like certain defeat. Like this is kind of an end of times conversation that they're having, because taking on this creature is like very likely death. And I felt that through the whole episode. I actually said in the spoiler-free review, I got a bit of a Return of the King flavor from this whole episode. Not in specific things that happen, but just in that, like, particularly the whole sequence from Return of the King where, the men of the West are at the Black Gates and they know that this is a suicide mission. This battle is, but they're going to do it for Frodo on the off chance that he's still alive. I don't know. I got kind of like a certainty of death kind of feel from this whole episode that I really, really liked.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah, because after that kind of quieter sequence, they essentially move into formation in whatever the plan is being set in motion. So Mobius, because Sylvie somehow, when apparently you can just bring whatever, when you get pruned, you can just bring whatever you have with you. So she had one of those little like electronic devices for the TVA have.
The temp pad, I think they call it.
Yeah. So she brought that with her. So Mobius uses that just to fucking make a portal to go back to the TVA. I can't believe no one's ever been able to do that before. It's weird. So he does that. The couple of the other Lokis just kind of screw off and do their own thing. But Richard E. Grant kind of sticks with them to take down Alioth, because now the goal isn't necessarily just to like, let's just leave, but I'm not sure exactly why they think this, but they've come to the realization or the conclusion that if we find out essentially what's behind this smoke, if we find out what's going on behind Alioth, we can find out what's going on behind the TVA. I'm not really sure how they got that conclusion, but they don't seem to be wrong. So they go in with the intent of not killing Alioth, but essentially enchanting it the same way that Sylvia has been able to enchant. She said before, I think it's like all living creatures, like she's able to enchant people and find their memories or calm them down or make them kind of think or see or feel what she wants them to do. So that's their plan going forward.
And before we get to that, I just want to take a moment to talk about the scene when Mobius leaves and goes through the portal. I loved that scene. I mean, we've said on the show before that the friendship between Loki and Mobius was maybe a little bit rushed, but I like it. I think it's cute. I think it's a nice little buddy cop dynamic. But like, Mobius is leaving having no idea if Loki and Sylvie are going to survive this assault that they're planning.
Yeah.
And he just says like, so long, Loki, or whatever, and puts his hand out, and Loki gives him a hug.
Mm-hmm.
I got a little misty in that scene. I'm not going to lie. Now, you know me, I get misty very, very easily.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked that. I thought that was a nice sort of capper on their relationship up until this point. I'm confident they're going to come back together in the finale at some point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But how did that work for you?
Yeah, no, I thought it was very sweet. Like, obviously, like you, I don't think that I wasn't under the impression that this is really the last time they're going to see each other in this show, but it was at the very least, it felt like, more so than last episode, it felt kind of more earned, even though not that much more has happened between them. But I did feel kind of this connection between them. Like when they hugged, it was just like, well, one, I mean, even regardless of who it was, it's just bizarre seeing Loki hug someone and not being, conniving about it or not being kind of duplicitous. Like he's legitimately giving someone a sign of affection. He really cares about this person. Yeah. So regardless of who the friendship was, I think it was touching to see just how far Loki has come as a character and how less of a shitbag he's kind of been in this series.
Sorry for all the coughing, everybody. Water went down the wrong pipe.
I hate when that happens.
It's the worst. So Mobius leaves, and then basically, if I remember correctly, classic Loki, Richard E. Grant's character, kind of wishes Loki and Sylvie the best and goes off. They go and get ready to start this assault, and so Sylvie's going to conjure or going to try and enchant Eliath. It's coming closer, but she's got to wait for like a tendril to come down to make contact with it. So Loki starts basically running around trying to get Eliath's attention. And then classic Loki comes back at the end of the episode, and Sylvie basically says like, I think we're a lot more powerful than we realize. Mm-hmm. And basically classic Loki is sort of conjuring out of his mind like a version of Asgard to get Eliath's attention, because that's an entire city that it can eat.
Yeah.
And he's clearly like giving like, I can't remember. Does he die at the end of the episode? Do we know?
It's hinted at. So essentially, he's talked, they was set up a bit earlier how he's incredibly great at projections, and he was so good at projecting an image of himself that even Thanos, with some of the Infinity Stones, was fooled by his projections. Right. So that kind of set up that at the end, he was really the only other Loki variant that showed up to assist them, so that Sylvie could have enough time to enchant Eliath. And like you said, he just conjures up this entire city of Asgard, and it was a really spectacular sequence, just kind of seeing it and the music swelling, and it was a combination of the Loki theme, but also it was Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries theme, which is very popular and associated with the movie Apocalypse Now, but it has a double meaning because of Norse mythology and the Valkyries, and of course the Valkyrie character. So I thought that was a great little touch. And yeah, really, it was one of those like spectacle sequences of CGI that felt very cinematic, but it wasn't an action scene. It was like kind of when CGI or special effects were still special. Like it wasn't just used to be like, oh, this person's doing quadruple backflips away from an explosion because it's the action scene. Right. This felt really like, I was impressed by it. I was like, wow, that's like, I think I said, wow, like out loud as he was doing it. And it was a noble sacrifice, because at the end, the big old smoke monster was charging at him, and it passed through him, and the only thing that remained was like this smoking helmet of his afterwards. So I think it's insinuated that he got whatever the fuck happens to him. He got obliterated.
Yeah, and one thing that really stood out to me in that sequence was the music. Like, I've really liked the music throughout this entire series, but this is an episode where it really stood out. And again, it looked gorgeous. One thing I didn't recognize, because at the last shot of the episode, as Sylvie is like really connecting with Eliath, it sort of opens up and we see this like castle. Was that an Easter egg that you recognized? Do you have an idea or
no? There's
theory?
a lot of people that are speculating on it. I think that it wasn't made clear intentionally. I think
Okay.
it's still, that's sort of like what that castle is and who's in it, what's going on with that. I think that's just going to be answered in the next, obviously the final episode. There's everybody has a bunch of theories, everything ranging from like, oh, it's a castle, so it must be Doctor Doom. I don't know. A lot of people think that Kang the Conqueror is behind everything. And there's some things that are leading towards that, partially because Kang the Conqueror has already been confirmed to be in the Marvel franchise. He's going to be the villain in Ant-Man 3, Quantum Mania. And he's already been cast, Jonathan Majors. So a lot of people think that's the case. I'm not sure, because if we're looking at the previous two Marvel shows, whenever they get to the final episode and it's a big reveal of who the villain is, they never, so far in the previous two, they've never introduced a new character in the last episode.
Right.
In WandaVision, the big bad was Agatha, who's been there the entire time. In Falcon Winter Soldier, it was Blondie McBlonde-faced. I forget what her name is. Sharon Carter. Sharon Carter. And so that's why I'm like, I get that a lot of people think like, oh, well, Jonathan Majors is already cast as Kang and he's, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I feel like I guess I wouldn't mind if it was, I guess setting up for other things, if this was our first introduction to Kang the Conqueror. But at the same time, I don't think I'd be surprised if it's just, I don't know, like another Loki variant, like the first Loki or something. I don't know. What do you have any thoughts on what it could be?
I have no idea. Again, I've tried to like stay away from speculating on this series. I just want to let it wash over me. I just when I saw that castle, I felt like, because I don't know, like I'm a fan of the MCU. I've seen all of them except for Thor 2 all the way through, but I don't know Marvel comics super well. I think you know them a lot better than I do, so I thought perhaps that was like a very obvious thing that just went completely over my head. But
no, a lot of people are just like, what is it? Who is it? So speculations abound at this point. And like you, I don't have one that I'm really like leaning towards. I'm just kind of like, well, all right, let's just see. Whatever. Let's just wait. It's one more week. Less so now. Since today's Sunday, we only have a few more days until we get to the big old conclusion. So let's hope they don't mess it up, man. I've been liking this show. I think it's been more consistent for me than either of Marvel's two other shows. WandaVision had more episodes. It was like 9, I believe. And I think like 6 or 7 of them, or the majority of them, I was way into. And then the last few just felt like it kept stumbling and the finale was kind of lackluster.
Right.
Falcon and Winter Soldier was okay. Like I liked individual moments of the episodes, but I was never really fully invested. Loki, I've been with it the entire way through. Like I said, I think it's seemingly for me kind of been progressing, like getting like better in quality. And each episode feels very unique. Each episode almost has like its own little thing, even though it does feel like one giant story, kind of like a longer movie stretched out as opposed to like individual episodes. But each one has its own unique sort of location and plot. They don't kind of blend together in my mind. Like if you were to ask me certain questions about Falcon and Winter Soldier, like when did the terrorist organization blow up the hospital? I'm like, I don't know, the 4th one? I don't remember. You know what I mean? Like they just kind of blend together in my mind. Whereas Loki, each episode, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what happened because it had this distinct location or in this distinct scenario. So I really like that. And I'm really hoping that they break the little curse, the little Marvel TV curse that's just started this year, which is they can't really end their shows on a great note.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess like you said, we'll see in just a handful of days.
Yeah,
and
looking forward to it, man.
Of course, we will be doing a full spoilers review for that next week on the show. So, and you can look forward to a spoiler-free review on my channel presumably on Wednesday. So
Yeah.
that's cool. So we're going to move on. Of course, though, jump into the comments below. Let us know what you thought of this episode. What do you think the castle is? Are you on the Doctor Doom thing, on the Kang thing? Jump down there. Let us know what you think. We're going to move on and briefly just talk about Black Widow's box office. Now, of course, Black Widow was supposed to come out last year. Supposed to come out, I think, in like April of 2020.
Yeah.
COVID happened. They pushed it back. They pushed it back. They pushed it back. It is finally out. It came out on Friday in theaters, which here still in Ontario, not open yet. It's looking like they're opening up on Friday. So I'm hoping to get back to my church one of these days.
Nice.
Now that I'm all double vaxxed, you know. But it came out in theaters in the States and around the world, but it also came out on Disney Plus with Premier Access, which means, you know, of course, if you have a Disney Plus account, you can get the movie. I think it costs you about $30. So it came out, and let me pull up the article here.
I have one from Variety pulled up already.
Okay.
Yeah, so essentially the main headline is saying Marvel's Black Widow debuts with dazzling $80 million in theaters and $60 million on Disney Plus. So for a total of $140 million just domestically. This is big news on both accounts. First of all, with 80 million, it has taken the place. Fast and Furious, Fast 9, came out 2 weeks ago, and that set a record with about like 70 million. And that was at the time, just for 2 weeks, was the biggest domestic opening weekend of the pandemic era. And, you know, going back to late 2019 with the Rise of Skywalker, this was the biggest opening. And Black Widow passed that. A lot of people were thinking that Black Widow could have reached 100 million. A lot of like pundits were like, oh, this could be 80, 90 million, 100 million, just of how like tracking metrics go. But still, even though it fell short of that, 80 million has now taken the new kind of title for now as the highest opening weekend of the pandemic era, which says a lot. I think it says that people are ready, absolutely ready to go back into the theaters. And it's important to mention that, like you said, a lot of theaters are still not open. A lot of people don't realize, I don't think a lot of people realize that when people talk about the domestic box office, it's actually including both Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
All theaters across both of those countries. So the fact that Black Widow was still able to make this much with theaters not at 100% capacity in both of these countries.
Well, and again, at least I'm not sure about the other provinces here, but
yeah,
like all of Ontario, no theaters are open.
Yeah, I think that's still it's an even bigger achievement. I think that under normal circumstances, this would have debuted to more if it wasn't in the pandemic and theaters were open. But even for the hand that it was dealt, 80 million is quite the achievement. So, Court, before we talk about the Disney Plus aspect, because that's a whole other not another topic, but a whole other discussion I'm gonna ask you about. What are your thoughts on this, on the news, this $80 million in theaters, biggest opening weekend of the pandemic era?
I think it's great. I'm sure the people at Disney and Marvel are very happy about it. I'm sure they would have preferred 100 million, but
yeah, this
is good news. As you said, it really does suggest that a lot of people are getting more comfortable with the idea of going back to the theater, which has been a scary proposition for quite some time.
Yeah.
I also think there's a distinct possibility that Black Widow benefited from Fast 9 coming out first.
Yes.
Because that made money. And I think it showed people who might have been hesitant to go see Black Widow if that was the first thing to come out, that other people were comfortable going back to the theater for that. So I think with that 2-week buffer and, not a lot of people being reported to having gotten sick from being at that movie. And the 2 weeks that's the incubation period that we have with COVID-19. I think that probably really worked in Black Widow's favor. It's like, I can't think of the analogy I'm trying to come up with, but it's always easier when somebody else takes the chance first, and then everything's okay. Like,
For
even
sure.
though I have a couple friends in my circle of friends who are like hesitant about getting the vaccination, and then I got it and I was fine. And then they were like, okay, well, he took one for the team. So
Yeah, someone else kind of dips the toe in the water first
right.
and says, like, come in, the water's fine. And yeah, I think that similarly, the way that F9 broke records in the pandemic era, showing people like, oh, hey, theaters are open, people are going to theaters. I want to go back to the theaters too, and then kind of pave the way for Black Widow to do as well as it did. And I think that whatever the next kind of really big anticipated movie that's going to be coming out this summer. I don't know what that would be. I can't think of the schedule off the top of my head.
Sure, yeah.
I think that might even be able to do better because people like you said, more people are getting vaccinated. I think more theaters are opening every day, every week. So I think that we're just going to probably continue to see this increase, this incline of people going back to the theaters. It may not go back to exactly 100% the way it was back in like 2019, but it's slowly but surely, I think that we're going back to a bit of normalcy.
Right. Well, I read an interview because theaters in Ontario are getting ready to open up. Like I said, I think it's Friday is the day as we enter into stage 3 of the reopening plan. But I read an interview with the CEO of Cineplex Odeon, which is Canada's like biggest movie theater chain. It's pretty much a monopoly, but he made a couple points that I hadn't really considered about how theaters are safer than certain other situations that are indoors, in that they have very high ceilings, they have very powerful ventilation systems. But one thing that it had never occurred to me, but it's an important thought, because they're doing socially distanced, reserve seating, but everyone's facing the same direction. That never occurred to me to be a thing, because that's the easiest way for the virus to transfer, for me talking directly into your face. But if everyone's facing the same direction, a number of feet away from each other, I just thought that was interesting.
No, that is interesting. It's something I haven't really taken into consideration. I know that particles can still linger. I'm not saying, I mean, I think there's some truth to that, but it's also like, all right, what about the dude that's behind you? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that just, if you get vaccinated and you feel more comfortable and you see in your areas that's the cases are going down, and especially the deaths are going down, then yeah, I think that it's safe to go kind of back out into the world again. I certainly have. I haven't gone to the theaters yet since getting vaccinated, but I have gone out to restaurants, and I have seen friends, and I have seen people. And just because cases just keep kind of going down where I am. And so, yeah, I think that it's becoming, like you said, it's becoming a lot safer to go back to the theater, and as opposed to maybe other things, it could be safer than maybe just going to like a enclosed bar and you're talking like 5 inches away from someone's face, staring directly at them
and yelling because the bar is cranking Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. So,
well, you have to sing along to that. So one other thing that I wanted to bring up, because I think this is very interesting, and it comes with a double-edged sword. So in addition to making $80 million in theaters, it also made an additional $60 million on Disney Plus Premier Access. Of course, like you mentioned, if you're a Disney Plus subscriber and you decide to fork up an extra $30 just to kind of rent this movie, you could watch it at home. And Disney has done this before. I think that they've released new movies on Disney Plus since the pandemic, but I think they've only done this twice or 3 times. I can't think, but
they did it with Mulan.
They did it with Cruella.
That's right.
And they might have done it with Raya. I don't remember. I don't remember specifically, but the point being that they've tried this before, and especially with Mulan, it just didn't really go too well. They released kind of the metrics, and it seemed like, okay, after a week, there might have been maybe 20 million dollars worth of box office coming from the Premier Access, and that was over a week. And even for Cruella, which did also premiere in theaters as well, that didn't really make a splash. I don't even think they released the metrics for that necessarily. I just remember reading about the box office, the theatrical box office for Cruella. So for a while, it seemed like, this is just kind of a last resort that Disney was going to do, to kind of make some money off of these movies during the pandemic. And because of the kind of poor reception, or not poor reception, but because of the low kind of monetary gain that they've been having so far, it didn't seem like this is something that they would continue onward in the future, even post pandemic. But this kind of changes things a bit. The fact that Black Widow made only $20 million more, which is a lot. That's still a lot of money, but it almost made as much money in home sales as it did in theaters. And so it makes me wonder if Disney is really going to kind of reconsider this whole Premier Access thing. Like, you know what? People stay in and they pay for it. Like we're making money. If there's not as much of a disparity between the theater box office and the Disney Plus box office, then it makes me wonder if this is something that's going to continue on even post pandemic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's an interesting point because theatrical exhibition, it's this is the way, but the way can change. And the fact is, when they put movies out in theaters do take a cut of that box office. I think it's generally about a third of the ticket price stays with the theaters. So Disney's only getting 66.6, the number of the beast percent of the box office, whereas on Disney Plus, they're getting every cent of it, which they want. The thing that I find very impressive here, specifically, is the double-edged sword is, okay, theaters aren't open or people might not be comfortable going to theaters right now, so we can put it out on Disney Plus Premium Access, charge $30. Great, we're still making some money. But the big drawback there is piracy becomes much easier because you don't have to sneak a camera into a theater and if you have the right, I don't know how it works, but I imagine if you have the right equipment, some kind of like capture software, whatever, you do it in perfect quality and you put it out online and then everyone has access to it illegally, but still piracy is a thing. It's a real issue.
It's a massive issue, and I'll let you finish, but there's something not in this article that I did want to bring up as well about how big of an issue that is. So continue.
Okay. The fact that this movie made $60 million in a weekend, when that is a very real, when if people are willing to download stuff, they have access to it, I'm sure 2 hours after it dropped on Disney Plus. The fact that $60 million worth of people still did it that way, I think the people at Disney must be super psyched about that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like I said, I'm kind of mixed on it. Like I appreciate that they still had the Premier Access because there's a lot of people, even domestically, that just wouldn't have a chance to see it any other way. They were like, okay, well, there's no theaters open near me at all. Like I can't see it. And they probably would be more in tune or inclined to kind of search out better quality, pirated videos online. If it was only released in theaters, they would watch a cam copy version, yada yada. But like you said, people are willing to fork up the money, even if they could have waited like a few more days to watch it online for free, which I'm not endorsing. I don't do that. Like I think you should pay your artist and such. So definitely not endorsing that. But yeah, I think it just shows it kind of shows it's a testament to what a money-making system this could be for Disney. Right. And it makes me wonder as well, because hypothetically, if they didn't release it in Premier Access, let's say, even if it was like half of the people that did buy the Premier Access this weekend, if even half of them, if they didn't have that option, they just went to the theater instead, then this movie would have opened up to over 100 million in theaters. So I think this is one of the few times where there is a direct correlation with some of the box office numbers for the theaters kind of dropping a bit, just because so many people stayed home and watched it. Which is like, it's an interesting thing, because as you mentioned, Disney keeps 100% of the Disney Plus profits, but it keeps maybe only about 2/3 of the profits from theaters. So I don't know. I'm really hoping that this doesn't become a a trend. I'm really hoping that once theaters are kind of open at more full capacity, and like more theaters domestically and abroad are open, I hope that Disney kind of just stops with the Premier Access stuff, because I do want to go back to the theaters, and I do kind of want that to be the main exhibition place for big films. I don't know.
I'm kind of the mind that as long as if they do day and date in theaters and on premium access, that's fine. As long as I have the option. I think the consumers, now that they've set this precedent of doing it,
Yeah.
let the consumers have the option. If you are making a lot of money through premiere access and you're making money in theaters, yeah, maybe sometimes I don't feel like going out. Maybe I got a cold. I feel like crap. I want to stay home. All right, well, I'll just watch it at home.
Yeah.
I just want to have the option.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And the numbers show that still technically more people went to go see it in theaters than saw it at home. And even if you look at the metrics for, which they don't release as much, but for HBO Max, the little experiment they've been doing of releasing movies day and date at home, at HBO Max, and in theaters, the number of downloads, or the number of views that a movie would get at HBO Max still paled in comparison to, people going into the theaters. So I think even with the option, it's showing that people are still wanting to go to the theaters. I don't think it's like fully squashing that. But yeah, interesting times ahead. I'm looking forward to how future box office reports come out for the other bigger movies that may not be releasing day and date. So yeah, interesting times.
Indeed. Okay, we should move on unless there's anything else you wanted to mention about that story.
No. We can move on.
Okay, so we are going to do full spoilers discussion of Black Widow now. Of course, as I said, we're not going to go beat through the whole movie because it's a long movie, but we are going to be talking quite openly about it. I have asked Chris to run point on this discussion today because he just saw the movie on Friday. I saw it like 2 weeks ago, so it's already like a little bit blurry in my head. But before we go into specifics, let me ask you, Chris, what were your sort of overall feelings on Black Widow, and where would you, I'm not going to ask you to rank all the movies.
To rank them, yeah.
It's absurd. There's 400 of them, but like, where would you put it sort of in a sliding scale? Would you put it top third, middle third, bottom third of the MCU movies? What do you think?
I quite like this. There was a lot that I really, really liked about it. I think 2/3 of it were quite good. I think 2/3 of it were like kind of top third Marvel material for me. Everything, and this is going to be a spoiler discussion, but I won't go into full details right now. But essentially, everything from the beginning up through kind of the family dinner that we see in the trailers of Natasha, Florence Pugh's character, David Harbour's character, all sitting together in their costumes at the dinner table. Everything through that, I was kind of loving. I was really loving. And then the last, maybe 40 minutes of the movie, last 45 minutes, when it's kind of like, okay, we're going to a secret, base in the sky, and we have to do the action scene. It was fine, but I was kind of less interested in that. So overall, I really liked it. I think I would kind of put it maybe in kind of the top third of the Marvel movies. It'd be right at the bottom of the top third, if that makes any sense. Like it's better than average. I don't think it's middling, but it doesn't quite bring it home all the way through.
Okay. Yeah, I'm close to you. I would say it's kind of at the top of the middle third, which is
okay.
Almost
so
right.
We're pretty, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I do agree. It does kind of, I don't want to say it loses steam in like the third act, but it starts becoming very generic.
Yeah.
I did think, and we'll get to it, there was one action sequence, which I messaged you after I saw it. I was like, if you're going to see this movie in the theater, this is the scene for it.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. That one sequence towards the end, I thought was awesome. But for me, I'll get to that. Yeah, the first 2/3, really liked. In my spoiler-free review, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about Scarlett Johansson in this role. She's been playing this role for years. We know she's good at it, and she's good here. She's really good.
Yeah.
I thought Florence Pugh was fabulous in this movie.
Mhm.
I've been all aboard the Florence Pugh train since I saw a Netflix movie called Outlaw King at TIFF a couple years
Oh
ago.
yeah. I
With
always forget
Chris
she's in
Pine.
that. Mhm.
That was my introduction to her, and then I saw her in this little horror movie. I think it was called Malevolent, which wasn't great, but she was really good. Midsommar. I didn't love Midsommar, but she was amazing in it. I think she's incredible. She was
Yeah.
wonderful in this movie. I don't know how much of the physicality was her or a stunt person, but
Mhm.
it all looked good to me.
Yeah.
I love David Harbour in this.
Oh, totally.
He reminds us how funny of a guy he is,
Mhm.
but also he's got some pretty heavy dramatic moments. He's got some good fight scenes.
Mhm.
I bought his Russian accent for the most part.
Mhm.
I liked Rachel Weisz. She gets a lot less to do here.
Yeah, she's not bad by any means, but she doesn't really get too much to do, and she's besides the opening sequence, she's the one that comes in the latest in the movie story wise.
And I will say one of my favorite moments of the movie was the sort of cold open. It's kind of like its own little mini movie with Natasha and Yelena as little kids living in Ohio, and they have to make this escape. And I thought it was very tense and fun, and
oh yeah,
I dug that. One of my hesitancies going into this movie was the dinner table scene, because from what we saw in the trailer, it all looked very corny, because the only stuff from that scene they showed us were the jokes, mostly around I believe his name was Alexei, the Red Guardian character. And that was such an interesting scene, because it goes through these like kind of 3 specific beats where it starts off, and it is very funny. It's just this family talking smack at each other, and then it gets like very heavy and it gets emotional, and Florence Pugh crushes it in that scene. And then she has that quiet moment with Alexei where they start singing American Pie. And I remember in the cold open when little Yelena's in the backseat singing that song in the car. I was like, oh, that's coming back. That song's coming back later in this movie. But meanwhile, then we have Natasha talking to
Milena, I think is her name.
Milena, yeah, it was something.
It's Milena and Yelena. I'm like, you couldn't have found 2 different names to use.
Like, Ursula, come on now.
Yeah.
But so, and I liked the way they set that up too, because it looks like in that scene, Melina, I think maybe it was Melina, is going to sabotage Natasha and Alexei and Yelena. And later on, we find out that was a red herring. I really like that. And again, I thought Scarlett Johansson crushed it in that scene. I thought she was wonderful in it.
Yeah.
My biggest issue with this movie were both of the villains. I thought Taskmaster looked cool, had some cool hand-to-hand combat stuff, but given the fact, and spoiler alert, in this film, Taskmaster, I don't remember her name, is actually the sort of main villain played by Ray Winstone. He's her daughter, who Natasha thought she killed in an explosion years ago when she was a child.
Yeah.
But her powers are that she's like this amazing mimic, so she can mimic the style of any fighter, be it Black Widow or Hawkeye or whomever it is. They didn't really do a whole lot with that. Like, again, the hand-to-hand combat was cool, but they didn't do anything with that cool idea. And then there was like no character there whatsoever.
Yeah, it was a bummer. For a lot of reasons. Like, one is it reminded me of how we've talked about the Marvel shows, because it's been 2 years since a Marvel movie has come out. The last one was Spider-Man Far From Home in July of 2019, which is weird. It's the longest gap that they've had between Marvel movies since, I don't know, the first Avenger or something. So it's weird. And after coming off of the Marvel shows that have been premiering this year, we've talked a lot about how we always kind of imagine them like if they try to condense it, if those Marvel shows into a movie, all the things that they would have cut. And I'm not saying that this movie felt like a TV show, but I was thinking how that's probably the biggest storyline or subplot that had to get cut for this movie. Where if this was a TV show, they would have expanded on who Taskmaster was, and especially the reveal of who Taskmaster was in because there is a lot there. I think there's something interesting about the backstory, but you're right, they just don't do anything with it. They don't do anything with her. Right off the bat, I was a bit bummed because I was watching, the opening credit sequence, which has a cover of "Smells Like Teen Spirit," which is an odd choice. Okay. Everyone seems to fucking hate that. I thought it was fine. I wasn't like, yeah, this is my jam, but I liked it. And everyone and their mother, even if they give this a good review, they're like, what the fuck is with that cover? I'm like, God damn, it's fine. It's not that big a deal.
It's, it's not, again, I love the original song. I'm wearing a Nirvana hat.
Yeah.
It's not the cover I had a problem with. The cover was fine. It was, kind of the minor keys, sort of mellow, haunting, with female vocal. It was cool. It felt so out of place to me. Like the music started, and I didn't know what it was at first. And we get this like montage of like, espionage video, like out of a James Bond movie or whatever. That was all cool. As soon as the singing started, I literally like started laughing out loud. I was just like, it's so on the nose. And I get that some of the lyrics like apply to Natasha very, very well, but I don't know. I found it really goofy. I feel like it even would have worked better like over the closing credits, but like right in the beginning, I don't know. I just thought it was funny.
I disagree because Marvel movies don't typically have opening credits. Especially the latter ones, they just jump right into it. And so this was kind of a throwback somewhat to James Bond, which there's a lot of references to James Bond films throughout. In fact, she's watching, I think, The Spy Who Loved Me at one point. Natasha is one of the Roger Moore films. And so this one didn't quite have the same style of, it wasn't as stylized or cool as like a James Bond opening title sequence, but I was like, I do appreciate a solid opening title sequence. The song, because I've known the cover, I forget the name of the band. I think it's shit. I know them. It's a band and I've heard this cover before and I like the cover. And like you said, the original song from Nirvana is intentionally, it's okay. Kurt Cobain has been vocal or was vocal about like, it's nonsense lyrics that don't mean anything. And it's essentially just making fun of pop music. I think that's 80% true because I think even if it's accidental, I think that there's some poignancy to some of the lyrics in that song, especially even from the original, where it's a rock song, it's a punk rock song, but it has this melancholic tone to it. And then doing it with this cover, it kind of hammers it home, but the movie hammers everything home. It's a Marvel movie. Everything from the themes of family to the themes of women being kind of overpowered by men and being controlled by the patriarchy. It's all they're banging the notes. They're not playing them softly. And I thought this was cool. I thought it was cool. Like I said, I wasn't like, this is great. It's like a great Bond theme, because it wasn't. It was mostly just kind of like visual exposition. It was all stuff that you could have just fast forward to and not really missed anything. So I didn't mind it. I guess I only brought it up for two reasons. One is because I didn't understand the vitriol behind people not liking it. But two, I kind of wish that I did skip it, because right in the beginning, I saw the name Olga Kurylenko, who's an actress who is actually a Bond girl. And
she was in Quantum of Solace.
Yeah, Olga Kurylenko by no means is like an A-list actress, but she's been in a lot of stuff and she's a known name. I mean, I know who she was. And I just was thinking, okay, I've not seen her in any of the promotions whatsoever. I haven't seen her in any of the trailers. I didn't see her in the posters. I didn't even see her on IMDb. She's Taskmaster. Because like, who else? Because there's no way that who else would she be? And so I was right on the money. She was Taskmaster. And also I pegged narratively, like right off the bat. As soon as they were like, "Oh, you tried to kill Dreykov, but you failed. He didn't die." I'm like, okay, well then his daughter that was also there, she didn't die, and she's Taskmaster. And that's where I mentioned where it's like I think that backstory is kind of interesting. That like the daughter of the main villain is kind of like this brainwashed kind of monster, and they could have done something interesting with it, but they didn't. And she had one line of dialogue, and I'm like, why get an actor? Why get an actual actor and someone that was a Bond girl as well if you're not going to do a damn thing with her? I thought that was so strange to me.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you talk about this movie sort of hammering home the concept of the patriarchy, and it does. I mean, it's not subtle at all with whatever Ray Winstone's character's name is, Dreykov.
Dreykov, yeah.
He's like, brainwashed all of these women. He's been doing it for years, and they essentially like do all of his dirty work for him, and whatever. It was on the nose, but whatever. But it's sort of like, it's kind of similar to Bucky, right?
Yeah.
This guy who's been brainwashed to do all this horrible stuff, but like throughout the movies, we're given his perspective as well. And we saw in Falcon and Winter Soldier how much he struggles with that and how much he has to deal with that. They give us none of that here. Yeah. She was just this like, well, not super soldier, but like a super soldier.
She's really good.
And then
great soldier.
Yeah, and then they turn off the brainwashing. She's well, damn, I was brainwashed.
Yeah,
and then the character's gone. Like it was just, I like you were saying, like maybe there was a lot of stuff there that was cut that would have made it more of a thing. But I honestly felt Taskmaster was like had less of a personality than like the Terminator in the first movie. Like there was nothing there.
Which is also a bummer because they've deviated a lot, and I'm not a comics purist by any means. I like, how some people were very upset in Iron Man 3 when Ben Kingsley turned out to not be the Mandarin. Right. I thought that was funny. Everyone else was like, yeah, it's not like the comics. So I'm not like that normally. However, they did the thing they did in X-Men Origins Wolverine with Deadpool, where it's like, okay, we'll take Deadpool and then we'll remove his mouth and make him look nothing like it. So it was basically like, why even have Deadpool in that movie whatsoever? So Taskmaster, the costume looks similar to what it does in the comics, but the character in the comics of Taskmaster is almost more like the Riddler in the sense that he's very charismatic. It's a he in the comics, so I don't mind about changing the genders at all, but he's I say he's like the Riddler because in addition to kind of like mimicking people's physicalities and fight moves, he kind of just fucks with them. He kind of just messes with their minds, and he's always kind of taunting them. And he's a very vocal character. That's why you see him kind of, you see him in teamed up against kind of Spider-Man because they're both kind of like chatterboxes and they kind of go after each other. So I thought that was a weird choice as well, that it's like, okay, you got Taskmaster. Is he going to be like he or she going to be kind of like an interesting intellectual villain? No, just robot that does moves. And so that was a shame as well. The villains, I think, including Ray Winstone, who's a great actor, was also kind of a weak villain. It felt very much like a stand-in for what the theme was, which is essentially just kind of overcoming patriarchy. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that as a negative thing. I support the theme. I think it's very empowering for young women to kind of feel this way. And this in the plot,
dude, I'm a dude. I felt empowered.
Yeah. I was like, get him, Natasha. Yeah. But yeah, something that makes a lot of sense is that they've been banging around the idea of a Black Widow movie for a while, but it really wasn't until after the 2017 Me Too movement, which Scarlett Johansson was very much vocally a part of, that this really kind of started to come into fruition. And she's a producer, I believe, of this movie as well.
Yep.
And I think that you could feel that the motivations behind the Me Too movement kind of came into the script, where that's really what it felt like. It felt, again, for anybody who's like, oh, it's going woke, you can shut up. It really is just kind of about women feeling like, look, I'm just not going to be fucking controlled. And that's really what the theme was. It was about control, having their own agency, having their own abilities to do what they want. Yelena's character talks at certain lengths about, like, I've never had a choice before. Look at this vest that I just bought. because it's the first thing I ever bought by myself. And that was the main kind of crux of it. So the villains felt very much more like symbolic kind of entities that just needed to be taken down, because it meant more, how do I say it? It meant more for the characters to overcome these obstacles than it did for the plot. Like the plot is just kind of like, okay, whatever. So I appreciated it, but at the same time, it did feel almost kind of like Marvel Phase 1 when it comes to their villains, because Marvel used to have a really bad villain problem where they just kind of sucked and then they got good again. This one felt like they kind of regressed, where it's like villains are an afterthought, really.
Yeah, and I mean, I think with the whole like female empowerment thing, like it didn't feel shoehorned here, because it's a Black Widow movie. Like, what did you expect? Of course, they're going to be strong women fighting back. You know, that's what it was always going to be. You're right. Yeah, Dreykov, very sort of just generic villain. I didn't care about his plight. I didn't care about his plot. I didn't, you know, but one of my favorite moments in the entire movie, and it's sort of like when Natasha goes to confront him, and it totally reminded me of the end of RoboCop, when RoboCop's trying to kill Dick Jones, but then the whole thing is, you know, Directive 4 classified is he can't assault anyone from OCP. And it's sort of the same thing has been built into her due to like Dreykov's pheromones or something, that she can't hurt him. And so she's like, we don't necessarily realize it in the moment, but she's like taunting him, and he's like literally just punching this woman in the face. And then as the scene goes along, we're getting also exposition from, I don't remember if it was flashbacks or other scenes we're cutting to, but we find out that like there's like an olfactory gland here. Basically, that's what picks up the pheromones that's keeping her from. So then we realize, okay, she's been taunting him into punching her in the face to try and like silence that gland. And then she makes some joke about like, you just weren't strong enough. Like you just like, you're not even strong enough to fucking hurt me enough to whatever. And she smashes her own face on the table. That sort of breaks the spell, if you will. And she kicks the shit out of it. In that scene, I was just like, fuck yes, this is awesome. I loved it. I was like, I wanted to cheer. It was so good.
That was a great moment. And that was it, regardless of the villain overall, it was that was a great merger of kind of what the themes were, what the messaging was, but also just kind of like a great character moment as well, because it really was essentially like her emasculating him, like, look, man, I thought you'd be able to punch harder than that, but you're just a big old wuss. And so she fucking does it herself. Like, she's got bigger balls than him, and then beats the shit out of him. And I was like, yeah, that's great. And
I love that, like, Natasha, once she does that reveal and smashes her own head, I love that she's like very clearly having fun with this. Like, she's loving that she's emasculating him. She's loving that she's got the upper hand and that he didn't even realize what she was trying to do. Like, she's having fun with it. It's great.
Yeah, I think, for sure. I think that the reason why the themes in the messaging, despite not really being subtle, I think part of the reason why they worked is that they were able to make it work narratively. Like, with everything that's been established with the MCU so far, like we have, even though they didn't go into like that much depth, we've known a bit of Black Widow's past, that she came from the Black Widow program, just kind of Russian agency, the Red Room, where they just kind of like completely brainwash these women to become indestructible, kind of not indestructible, but like very lethal, deadly weapons. They're weaponizing women. That's already been established. So when it just kind of felt like, okay, these writers weren't shoehorning in a message that didn't fit. They just were able to add on to already pre-established concepts within the MCU. So I think that's why it worked really well for me. I was like, yeah, this works. It didn't feel on the nose in the same way that the Tomorrow War was about climate change.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But so go ahead.
I just wanted to say, so the one action sequence that I was alluding to earlier, we've seen bits of it in the trailer, but it's basically when Natasha's falling from the sky and like deking through debris and all that. That was the moment watching this thing where I was like, God, I wish I had seen this on the big screen. I thought that sequence was just awesome. I loved it. Also, she like saves Yelena,
Mhm.
but that whole sequence was great. And she sort of dukes it out a little bit with Taskmaster on the ground, but then again uses the red smoke or whatever to sort of wake her up. And that's, I think, when Taskmaster has her one line. I did think once we kind of got to that point, the movie started doing a little bit of a Return of the King, in that it kind of kept ending. Like that scene sort of went on, and
Yeah, they could have ended it there, and then there's like an extra minute and a half that just was not necessary
yeah,
at all.
I don't like. Do we need to see Natasha meeting up with her like her arms guy, saying like, "Well, I'm gonna go get the Avengers back together. I'm blonde now." Like,
It's sort of like, it felt like as though someone was like, hey, we need to remind people that this took place actually before Avengers Infinity War, and
right.
not after Endgame, because she clearly died. So I felt, yeah, it felt kind of weird that it was there, but I understood why they put it in, even though it wasn't necessary for, fans of the series like us, because I think we already just knew where this took place in timeline was.
Well, and there was
Yeah.
enough. There were enough lines in the movie to explain that, like, because they mentioned the like Sokovia Accords, and they made it pretty clear that it takes place like after Civil War.
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah. But yeah, I I liked. I thought that, that's a cool sequence, them kind of flying around and falling from the sky. Felt very CGI, which may have
Mhm.
been lessened if I had seen it in theaters. So I do think I wish I saw that in theaters. But in addition to that, I think that, sorry, in addition to me liking the first kind of 2/3 of the movie more, is that I also thought that some of the best action scenes for me were earlier on. Like,
Okay.
although it was cool spectacle to kind of see him falling from this exploding space station, my favorite action scene was when Yelena and Natasha first reunite, and they have this like knockdown, drag out brawl in this apartment,
Mhm.
that I thought was really visceral. And you and I talk a lot about how we really don't like shaky cam when it comes to our action scenes. We don't like when it's super quick, fast cuts. And so this had a bit of fast cutting and it had a bit of shaky cam. But personally, I never felt disoriented. I felt like it added to it, where they would do like these really fast kind of moves, but then they would linger on a moment of like, let's say, like a finishing move. Like they do like a couple like, oh, punch, punch, block, block, and then someone would throw someone against like a glass window, and then they would just kind of linger
Yeah.
on that, like, ooh, because it really helped sell kind of the visceralness of it and the impact of it.
Yeah,
So
having that like little bit of downtime between
Mhm.
blows, I think
Yeah.
it actually, that sequence reminded me, what was the movie called? A couple years ago now. Um
Atomic
Charlize Theron,
Blonde.
Atomic Blonde. Yeah.
Yeah.
That fight scene, which was also in a kitchen. It sort of reminded me of that. I guess partially it's because it's women, but also just the way it was shot, how visceral it was, how clearly well trained these two actors or stunt performers, whatever it was,
Yeah.
were. Like the choreography was really, really strong.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was a great sequence.
And it came in right in the pretty early on in the movie. And yeah, that's some of the best stuff for me. You mentioned up top, I really liked the cold open. It was a different kind of cold open, in that it really did kind of sow the seeds within like 5 or 6 minutes, kind of these familial seeds that really just kind of resonated and helped everything else. Like within 6 minutes, you were able to kind of understand this family unit of a young Natasha, young Elena, Melina, and Alexei, and they're pulling like the Americans from that TV show from FX, of just kind of being undercover Russian agents. They gotta get the hell out of Dodge quick, because the cover's been blown. And even if that wasn't really a great action scene, it really, like I said, it really just kind of planted those seeds of like, this is a family unit that lingered throughout. And whenever they did have were reunited and they had kind of family conflict, I felt it. And it was
Mhm.
done. So from a screenwriting standpoint, I was like, that's a great way to start the movie. You got a bit of action, you kind of set up the plot, and you set up these character motivations. So
Yeah.
whenever they did meet up, it was great. And you know, some of my favorite stuff was, like I said in the beginning, with Natasha and Yelena. Florence Pugh is fantastic, as just kind of like her snarky kind of younger sister, who's just as deadly, just as lethal, kind of poking fun at her, kind of making fun of like her posing where she
Oh, I love
lands.
that. I
Yeah,
laughed
it
out
was
loud
great.
at that. That was
Dude, that
great.
moment, yeah, she's in the convenience store and she's like, "You do the thing with your hair, you flip back." It's so funny, and they're so great together.
Yeah.
Uh, David Harbour, like you mentioned, it's fantastic. Like his opening scene of him getting a tattoo in prison, or just like arm wrestling.
Yeah.
I don't recommend you get a tattoo while you're also arm wrestling about 20 dudes. Just a little heads up, a little life hack for you people. It's probably not going to end well. All that stuff was really great.
Mhm.
And again, not that it got bad. It just felt, once they kind of went up to the secret base and they were confronting Dreykov, that's when I was kind of like, okay, I know you're wearing your James Bond influences on your sleeve here, but this feels a bit by the numbers. Some of the action scenes felt, besides them falling from the sky, some of the hand-to-hand stuff when they were on the space station, it wasn't the space station, it was a sky station, sorry, felt very kind of perfunctory, just kind of like, okay, we got to have something, we got to have some explosions.
Right.
But yeah, like I said, it wasn't bad enough that it ruined the experience for me. And overall, I think that I quite liked most of it enough that I do kind of want to watch this again, and I probably do want to check it out in theaters next time, just because why not? And maybe that sequence of them falling from the sky will be like even more impressive, and I'll be right there on your level of just like, oh shit, this is a spectacle to behold.
Right.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed this.
Well, and I will say that because we do have to talk about the post-credit sequence, but
Oh yeah.
I remember like being 2/3 of the way through the movie going like, I really, really hope that this is not a one and done for Yelena, because Florence Pugh is so good.
Mhm.
I want her to be part of the MCU going forward.
Yeah.
And I mean, I got to say, the post-credit scene suggests that that's going to be the case, at least temporarily. So, of
Mhm.
course, the scene jumps into the sort of current timeline of the MCU, with Yelena going to visit Natasha's grave.
Mhm.
And I don't remember her full name. Valentina Elaine Bennis shows up.
Yeah.
And
she little kicks her way onto screen, just
yeah.
Yeah, and essentially, you know, she's a little snark master, as she was in Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Mhm.
So this was supposed to, apparently this was, you know, shot first before Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I think this was supposed to come out before, I mean, obviously it was supposed to come out before Falcon and the Winter Soldier. What a weird, can you imagine if this was the first time? Because like, I know it was surprising when we saw it in Falcon and Winter Soldier, but it seemed like they kind of eased us into her appearance a bit more. This was just, you hear someone blowing her nose, and then it's just fucking Elaine, just just right there. I don't know. I liked it though.
Yeah, so did I. And I mean, she pulls out an iPad and basically says, "Okay, here's your next target. This is the man who is, responsible for the death of your sister," which is true from a certain point of view. But of course, she
All right,
holds up the.
Obi-Wan.
I had to.
Yeah.
But of course, she holds up the iPad, and it's Jeremy Renner, Clint Barton, Hawkeye.
Mm.
And I think I've heard people speculating that may be at least part of the plot of the Hawkeye series that's coming, is maybe Elena going after him, which I'm into, because I want to see more of Elena. I wonder, however, because you're right. I mean, if Black Widow had come out before Falcon and Winter Soldier, and that scene played out exactly as it was, we'd all be like, "What the hell?" Because she doesn't introduce herself. She doesn't,
No.
I wonder if maybe that was like a reshoot where they went, "Okay, we've already introduced her in this other series. Get Julie Louis-Dreyfus in for a day.
Yeah.
Let's just rewrite the scene a little bit so it's not like, 'Hi, my name is,' but don't call me that."
Yeah. No, they must have, or did some fantastic editing around, because you're right. In Falcon and Winter Soldier, she full on introduces who she is and what her, she doesn't say exactly what her deal is, but she's just kind of like, "My name's Valentina and I'm doing this," and you have kind of an understanding of how she's like the nefarious version of Nick Fury. But in this they don't, and I can't imagine that this would have played out the same way that it did if it came out when it was supposed to, because people would have been like, "Who the hell is that? What's happening?"
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. I mean, because like you said, in Falcon and Winter Soldier, she straight up introduces herself to John Walker because she's just meeting him for the first time.
Yeah.
Whereas in this scene, the way it plays out, at least in this version of the movie, it's clear that she and Yelena have some kind of past. She
Yeah.
walks into the scene and like, I think Yelena even says like, "Oh, Valentina, hey, how's it going?" Like,
Yeah.
they clearly know each other.
Exactly. Yeah, there's some sort of history there. Again,
Yeah.
whether that was intended from the start, I'm not sure, but going forward, it's fine. The setup is intriguing because I think prior to this coming out, even prior to me knowing what the um, end credits sequence was, I think there was like not rumors, but the people were like, "Hey, Florence Pugh's been seen kind of fucking around on the set of Hawkeye because Hawkeye's still filming, or at least it was filming. It's should be coming out, I think, before the end of the year." So people were like, "Oh, she's going to be showing up in the Hawkeye show." That kind of makes sense. She was in, she's might be the newish Black Widow since Scarlett Johansson's seemingly gone. But this seems to kind of confirm it that um, I feel like Florence Pugh is going to show up in the Hawkeye show, considering that I haven't heard anything about Jeremy Renner showing up for another movie. And the fact that he has his own series, I mean, it's like, yeah, she's clearly has to show up there. I hope that it's more than just like a single episode. I hope that she kind of factors in as sort of like, they punt for a bit until she gets the truth of what exactly happened.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and she can be the stand-in for Natasha in that friendship, like once she understands that, he was doing everything he could to make sure Natasha was the one to live. How she's going to find that out, I don't know. I don't know. It would necessarily be as easy as like, no, Yelena, I said, don't kill yourself. I'll die. And she's just like, oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that makes sense. No. Yeah, either way, I'm stoked that Florence Pugh is going to be, hopefully sticking around for a while.
Yeah.
She's great in a lot of the stuff that you listed her as earlier, but she's also great in this role. So yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever they do with her in the future. One last thing I wanted to say, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Nope.
This is not really important, but it was just another little bit of Marvel world building that I'm like, you guys impressed me. You guys impressed me with your attention to detail. So I did not catch this, but somebody did. I don't know how these people just memorize every single line from a Marvel movie. But in the first Avengers, when Loki is trapped in his little glass prison, and there's that sequence between him and Scarlett Johansson, right? And they're kind of talking about like, oh, you got blood in your ledger, and she's trying to get information from him. He lists a few things trying to intimidate her. And I saw the clip, so I rewatched the clip after someone mentioned it. But he was saying like, he was listing all the terrible things that she's done. Like, you remember the hospital fire, this incident? And he says Dreykov's daughter. And that's just I can imagine that when Joss Whedon wrote that line, it was just like, okay, that sounds like a weird, mysterious thing. Right. Dreykov sounds Russian. Dreykov's daughter, we don't know exactly what it means. I guarantee you they didn't have a plan for this, but it was just sort of like, we'll just say that. So I really love that Marvel was like, no, let's do something with that. Like, they didn't need to, but they just took that little line and expanded on it. And now we have some context to, there is a Dreykov and there was an incident with his daughter. So little shit like that, I'm like, well done, Marvel.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I wonder if maybe in the Hawkeye series, whether it be flashbacks or something, like, are we going to get some explanation of what happened in Budapest? Because I know they referenced it in this movie, but they didn't really tell us anything.
I kind of hope they don't. That was something I was worried about, was that, because I like that they still kept it vague. That it was essentially like, it seemed like this get the hell out of Dodge situation where Natasha and Clint, whatever they had to do, it seemed like it was really intense, and there was scars left, and there was like arrows that were left in the wall, and yada yada. And I was really hoping, it was like, don't give us a flashback. Like, I don't want it to do the prequel thing of like, we need to explain and show you everything that ever happened. I kind of like filling in the gaps myself personally. Do you like that, or do you kind of wish that, like, no, show us a flashback, let's see exactly what happened in Budapest?
It depends. I mean, if they want to show me and it's good, awesome. I mean, if
That's
somehow
fair.
I were to get the script, I'm like, nah, this is stupid. I'd rather not see it.
Mhm.
That's kind of always how I am. If it's good and it works, cool. But
That's
who's to
fair.
say until we see it, you know?
That's fair. That's fair.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I guess that's pretty much the show then.
Mhm.
So we both like the movie. That's cool.
Yeah.
Of course, now we want to ask you guys who are watching, what did you think of Black Widow? What did you think of Loki? Do you have any thoughts on Black Widow's box office or the whole Disney Plus premiere thing? Of course, jump into the comments below. I do read all the comments. I respond to as many of them as I can. So don't think that your thoughts are going unread. Um, before we go, Chris, of course, where can people follow your internet exploits?
My Instagram handle is called Art of Light and Shadow. It's kind of a fun daily cinema blog. I post everything that I'm watching, but in addition, I do kind of like fun follower inclusive things like tournaments and rankings and recommendations. It's a lot of fun, so check it out. Art of Light and Shadow.
And of course, Andris hasn't been here for a while because he's been very, very busy. We hope the prodigal son will be back next week. But if you do want to check him out, go on YouTube, do a search for Cheap Thrills, Unspeakable Terror. He reviews sort of horror, sci-fi, B movies from the dawn of cinema to the modern era. I'm a big fan of his channel, so check it out. Of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Courtshake. You're already on my channel, but if you haven't subscribed, I'd sure love you forever if you did. Again, we want to encourage you guys, if you like this video, to drop a like on it, maybe give it a share around because it helps the video get out to more people. It helps the channel grow. We appreciate that very much. And of course, we want to remind you that if you don't want to watch a long YouTube video, you can get audio only podcasts on places like Google Podcasts and Spotify, with hopefully more to come. So we encourage you to do that. Of course, you know, the world being as it is, we hope you guys are all very safe, very healthy right now. Hopefully we're really starting to get our way out of this thing. So fingers crossed on all of that. Thank you guys very much for watching. We will see you next week. Until then, take care, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.